What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we come together with a brother or sister that's just exhibiting excellence in every field, every area of human endeavor, every area of culture, business, you name it. And we ask them about their God story and who God is to them and how He's influenced and impacts their life to this day. And so I'm excited to have an amazing brother here. I said Polymath, but there's a lot more things I could say about my brother. He's a Chi-Town brother, man, so you gotta be easy on the words. But my brother, Jay May, what's going on, good brother?
Hey, what's goody, man? How you doing?
Man, doing well, man. Great to see you. We're not gonna waste any time at all because I know when it comes to you, you push it to the boundary. There's so much rich value that comes from time. I wish people respect time more. That's a whole other joke we could talk about. But my brother, who is Jay May? Who's Jason Mayden, man?
Man, I am first and foremost a child of the Most High.
Mm.
I am, the physical child of Priscilla and Albert Mayden, which is the manifestation of a love that started, when they were in middle school.
Mm.
I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a designer, I'm a Southsider. I'm an exceptionally regular dude that just has used my gifts and talents beyond my own insecurities in a way that has served the greater good.
Mm.
And I'm a man of great discipline and peace and restraint.
Mm.
But at the heart of who I am, man, honestly, I'm a servant leader. That's really it.
Mm. Brother, I always say that God is the greatest creative of all time. We saw that from Genesis all the way, man. But your creative hand has started early, and what I love, obviously, we're friends, and so I kind of know your story to the extent that someone outside of you knows your story. But I would love for you to take me south side a bit, and then kind of just how you crescendo to wow, this creativity. How did you discover that? What was that process? What that looked like, man?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, who look at my career or look at what I've done, assume that the path was linear, that it was always something that was regarded as a gift. It actually wasn't. It started in second grade when my teachers labeled me as broken and told my parents that something was wrong with me, cognitively and potentially intellectually. They didn't take the time to really assess if I was gifted or if I was, at that point they would have called disabled. But, now we call it a learning difference. But my parents knew, my mother knew particularly, which is why she advocated for me in public school education and refused, along with my father, refused, the opportunity for me to be induced by drugs, by taking pills to suppress my quote unquote genius. And so that was the first time I understood the importance and preciousness of protecting childhood creativity and what that does for the kid to be able to emote and have a voice that they may not be able to articulate with words, but can show visually. Because around the same time that happened in second grade, I also became sick and I was on my deathbed. So I went to the hospital with septicemia, which is a severe blood infection. And when you're 7 and you realize your own mortality, it changes your orientation with every single thing you do in your life. So at that moment in time, good, bad, or indifferent, that moment in time is kind of hard coded into my brain as a period of, acceptance that life is temporal and my gifts can't be wasted. And I literally remember making a decision in my hospital bed that if God allowed me to come home and go to school like I wanted to, because I was a kid who wanted perfect attendance. I would wake up my parents in the morning. Like, I love school. But if God allowed me to wake up and go to school, that I would use every ounce of my gifts, to display to people what's possible with Him. And I've been doing that ever since. So that's really what creativity represents for me, is a second chance at life. And I just don't intend on wasting it.
Mm. Brother, man, I'm like, it sounds like new birth. It was like rebirth that happened on that bed, man, where you kind of saw like, hey, God, if you, kind of allow me to come home, and get back to school, it's kind of like, hey, I'll use everything that you've given me. Brother, what I love about one of a million things I love about you is that you relate. And I always say is the difference between trying to inspire people and trying to impress people. And you relate from the bottom up. And so even that story of you as a young man, as a boy who was cast off initially by teachers. So you know how many brothers relate to that, young boys relate to that in the school system today. And so it makes sense, I think, for people who know a little bit about your story, the work with Super Heroic, the work and how you speak in the school, the what you've done in the public spaces, public works. It makes sense. And so when you got home, so kind of take it from you getting home, you're like, God, you preserve. How did now you kind of start to cultivate, that creativity? What did that look like? You're right, because I know that obviously it's not linear before we get to the Jordan years, but kind of like what did that look like?
Yeah, what was wild is I was in the hospital over Easter break, and I was so upset because I knew during Easter that was when we had the activities for us to make the cards. Cards for our classmates, decorate the eggs, even though that those are pagan symbols.
Hmm.
It was the act of creativity over Easter that was really, really, really exciting for me. And so when I came home, there was probably 30 or 40 cards. The entire school drew pictures for me, and for the first time, I had felt, accepted, by someone. I felt accepted because I'm multiracial. My
Mm.
mom is fair skinned. She's black and Ashkenazi Jew, which we just found out. So,
Mm.
you grow up in the inner city and you look different and you're small and you're sick, and you don't have a lot of the accoutrements of, a wealthy family. You can see how you would want to have something to be known for other than, your physical attributes. So from
Mm.
second grade on, my parents, once the teacher labeled me as broken, my parents actually had a supplemental evaluation, which discovered and revealed that I was functioning cognitively at a collegiate level and as an elementary school kid. So there was nothing wrong with me. It was the teacher themselves and their laziness. They wanted me to, basically be taught to the level of their comprehension, not mine.
Mm.
So my mom told the teachers that, nothing's wrong with Jason. He's just bored. He has straight A's. He's a good kid.
Mhm.
Stop saying that he's bad and broken. She sent me to school with coloring books. And so after I would finish my work, I would, sit there for hours and color and draw and create. And eventually my classmates took notice and they would pay me like $1 to draw Ninja Turtles, to draw their names in bubble letters, to use
Oh, them bubble letters, man. Oh, you were one of them.
Yo, I was one of them. I had every Tanisha, Tanika, every girl in school.
It sounded like some X lyrics, man. That's a neat.
Yeah, like, like I'm drawing bubble letters like Tanisha, Taniqua, Tanika.
That was over some early ones' heads, man.
But that lasted until about fifth grade. When I started my first company in fifth grade, I started shoveling snow and cutting grass to buy my own school clothes and shoes because my parents understood I couldn't ask them for some of the stuff because it was ridiculously expensive at that time for our budget. But I was also struggling with self esteem because one of the side effects of the treatment I had was gaining rapid weight. So around fifth grade, I kind of ballooned up, not to the point where I was obese, but to enough for kids to just say like, "What's wrong with Jason? Well, how did he gain weight? What's going on with him?" And I remember dealing with, the very complex emotion of people questioning if, I was just this kid at home who was gluttonous, and me telling them it has nothing to do with that. Like, this is something I didn't ask for. And, when you're fighting an invisible enemy, that enemy turns into your inner me. And the voice that you hear is your own, telling yourself that you don't matter. So in fifth grade is when I knew of God, but I don't think I actually at that point had openly called on God until I asked him not to wake me up one day in fifth grade. I was like, why are you keeping me here? Nobody likes me. I don't look like anybody. I'm different. Why are you keeping me here? And God was like, I'm not done with you. I got you. And I knew. I heard him. I knew in that moment. It was like, that's undeniably God's voice. So that's really how creativity started. I'm like, man, if God is speaking to me and I'm just a person that's insignificant, that doesn't have all the cool things. I was nowhere near cool. I'm like, all right, then I gotta believe in me. And so at that point, man, I started talking out loud to myself. I spoke life over myself. I didn't listen to anybody else's dictation of what they thought I could be. I rejected all limits. I rejected all improbabilities and impossibilities. And I decided that my dreams were going to be manifested. And I wrote letters to Nike. I pursued every single outlet that would help me have an advantage over my invisible competition or other people trying to get there. And I just obsessed over showing people that God is real. Because if he can use somebody like me, the unlikely candidate, then he can use anybody.
Bro, there are bars there, man, but clearly the enemy becoming the enemy is something that I think many people could relate to, that internal talk and how that takes over. but just something about the fact that you found significance and worth around that journey, and you were like, yo, if God is speaking to me, then clearly I'm not unworthy, clearly I'm not this. And I think for people hearing, um, I've not met someone who's not felt that at some point in some way. Even in the space that we're going to talk to a little bit about around Jordan, there's two mentees I had who are in the league now, and one of the things that they were struggling with is just insecurity, right? Even though they have this great talent, the insecurity of that worthiness, or like the people only see the talent or they see the come up, but I feel unworthy. Um,
Mm.
and so man, so now you kind of speak through that creativity. You're kind of like nurturing it, and for you, that's like it seems like. And correct me if I'm wrong. That's like for you, active worship. You're like, yo, this is how I show God love. This is how I
Mhm.
serve people. And so now you again, for people understanding the story, you kind of being ground floor uno of kind of brothers who look like you in an iconic, let's even say timeless but not eternal brand. Take us through that, right? I'm gonna let you kind of bring that up. I'm gonna let you say it, right? Like I'm gonna let you say it. So take us to the Jordan years, man.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I had wrote letters to Nike since I was about 10 years old. I remember seeing on NBA Inside Stuff Amara Rashad talk about, Tinker Hatfield in Beaverton, Oregon. And at that time, the only thing I knew about Oregon was from the Oregon Trail game we played in public school. And I'm like, man, I'm not trying to get dysentery and I don't have cattle. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I don't know if Oregon for me. As a kid, you think like, dang, man, they out there with covered wagons and dysentery. That's not something I want
Dysentery.
and so I knew that it was a real physical place. And this was the early days of digital interaction. So it wasn't like I can go on and Google. So I had to look up analog ways of getting in touch. And on the back of their shoeboxes was an address. It was 1 Bowerman Drive. And so I wrote the letter. I called customer service. I told them what my dreams and aspirations were. And I did that for probably about 10 years, from fifth grade, 9 years, actually fifth grade up until my junior year in college when I got my internship. So they would send me catalogs and posters. It was a whole journey that happened in between me playing sports. And then I was hit by a drunk driver and changed high schools and a lot of ups and downs, man. I saw my friend get shot. A lot of stuff happened from my freshman year to senior year. And each obstacle made me even more, I would say, just obsessed with getting to my goal because I felt that the enemy was trying to get me to forfeit my blessing. Like I knew this wasn't from God or of God. It was intended for me to break my spirit. So, any great athlete, you take away one tool, they'll develop another. So, took away my ability to play football and do some other stuff, but amplified my ability to use an athlete's mindset and creativity. So got to school at CCS in Detroit and, started off, middle of the road, wasn't great, didn't have a solid portfolio, but wasn't horrible. Negotiated my way into the school, had an academic scholarship, but didn't have an artistic one. So I had to, major in industrial design, minor in graphic design, because they felt that ID may be too competitive and I may fail. Average age at that time was about 22. People got a degree, came back to school. I was a 17-year-old kid, just turned 17 when I got to college. And, it was the hardest thing I did. That summer in between freshman and sophomore year, I remember reading an article when I was a kid that Michael Jordan shot 1,000 free throws in order to get better at shooting free throws and at shooting mid-range jump shots. And I remember physically telling myself and writing on a post-it note, creativity is my jump shot. So I went and I practiced, a lot of, repetitious, sketching techniques. I went and read every book possible in an art institute in Chicago. I took figure drawing classes. And so I basically worked on my game in the summer, like athletes do in the off season. So when I got back to school, I was destroying everybody. Not because I wanted to compete with them, but I wanted to compete with the expectations I had on myself. I gave up a chance to go to Georgia Tech, and I wasn't going to come to CCS and fail because I had no plan B. This was it. And so wrote letters, same thing. Actually ended up I won a competition my sophomore year because in industrial design, the most competitive discipline is automotive design, at least at the time when I was in school. And so as an athlete, I'm like, I want to play with the best play. I'm not a car guy. I love cars, but I had no intentions in wanting to design them. So I got into this competition with Renault and Peugeot. I won it as a product design student because they said product designers were failed car designers. So I wanted to prove to them, like, nah, we can get down. So won the competition, was supposed to go study at Strat in Paris for my remaining education. That same time I won the competition, it was the summer between, like I said, my junior and senior year. Nike's internship finally came up for me because I got rejected 3 times before. I didn't know I was supposed to be a junior. I started applying the moment I got to college, and I had to make a decision: go to Paris, follow in the footsteps of some of my heroes from the Harlem Renaissance. You know, Carter G. Woodson, and you know, and you know, Jacob Lawrence and Cole, like all these people who came through the Harlem Renaissance had a connection back to Paris, and I felt I needed to be there. Even Martin Luther King. I mean, like some of the most prolific Black minds in history, something happened to them in Paris. And so I wanted to be part of that. A lot of people don't know my middle name is Carter. I was named after Carter G. Woodson. So that's why I care deeply about our history. And so having this opportunity, a kid from Chicago, never traveled outside of the U.S., go to Paris on a full ride, work for Renault and Peugeot, design cars, be in this jazz era environment, see the work of Toulouse-Lautrec, be around stuff, you know, that I love, Alphonse Mucha, Art Nouveau, and then boom, Nike. So I'm, you know, with every decision I've made, there's never been evidence of it working out. And I figured that's the choice to make because it forced me to rely on God only. As one of my homies, Alex Medina, told me. So I chose to go to Nike, no evidence of it working out. They actually lost the budget because I was supposed to go to Nike basketball. And so I get a call from a former CCS alum, Dave Rulo, who was working in Nike running. And they had him break the news to me like, hey, Nike basketball lost their budget, unfortunately, so you don't have an internship position anymore. But there's this group that's going to actually stand up this full brand. And you may have heard of them. I know you're from Chicago, so I don't know if you'd be interested, but, you know, Jordan Brand would love to have you as their first design intern. You know, how would you feel about that? So I'm like, yo, look at God. Like for months, I thought I was going to Nike basketball, right? And then the week before I'm supposed to leave, they tell me they lost the budget and I couldn't come. But if I wanted to still come, I can work in Jordan, you know, and the rest is history.
Bam. There was a lot in that, man. Number one, Paris. I mean, even Baldwin was out there. Paris, that had to be the stop, man. It was the stop, man.
Yeah.
But even from that, right? Peugeot, learned about Peugeot from my father through Nigeria, architect. So you got that experience, you know, out of the States. So Ozataz come back, ready to rock and roll with the Nike basketball. It seems ordained, like, oh man, I got the halo. I'm about to be out there. You get a shift, but a door opens up with Brand Jordan. I know it wasn't called maybe Brand Jordan at that time, but Jordan, which is huge because, you know, I heard one of our sisters kind of shed a word this week. She says, like, too many of us miss our moment because the disguise is a problem, right? And so there's a view of like you stepping into that, man. So wow, so that's kind of your intro to the kind of to Jordan and the brand and being designer, ground floor, right? And some of the iconic shoes that your hand was a part of. Now, I have to ask this question, man. I have to ask this question, man. Was there, let me put it this way. 2 things. One of the things that I think, and I think Will Smith talked about this a little bit around creatives. I think a lot of times it's almost like the beautiful mind dynamic, which is as a creative, I'm in my head a lot and people don't understand me. Was your relationship with God enriched because of that? Because there wasn't so many outlets where people could understand where things are. I think obviously the creative outlet was you all were kind of creative and designers, and obviously the business people, CFOs are budgeting things. But how much did that impact you, at least in that formative time when you're coming up and you're like, man, people don't understand? Was it that this Jordan Brand opportunity validated everything? So now you're like, hey guys, I wasn't so off after all, or was it just that it still was an internal battle even at Jordan?
Man, you know, to be honest with you, it was an internal battle up until maybe 2 months ago. If I could be completely frank. Because the thing about people like myself is we we often downplay our intelligence because it feels like shameful to talk about the things that we've been allowed to do. I
Mm,
used to feel shame for being, intelligent, shame for having a talent, shame for having a level of success in comparison to where I come from.
mm,
And it's not feeling unappreciative. It's just having a weird relationship with self worth because so many of us who grew up in these environments have tremendous amounts of self confidence, but we can't conflate confidence with worth. Confidence masks a lot of insecurities. And my insecurity was that I wasn't liked. I wasn't cool. I wasn't the one that people thought of. At least that's the story I told myself.
mm,
And because of that humility and growing up, mixed and growing up in the neighborhood with first generation people who didn't have any bread, and then going to college at a private art school that was in the heart of the hood of Detroit, but it was predominantly affluent, non-melanated people.
mm,
I really do feel like God allowed me to speak different tongues, speak different languages, have a high degree of empathy. Because when
mm,
you're consistently feeling downtrodden and feeling overlooked, you can't look down on anyone else because you're constantly looking up to God. So
mm,
I think because of that, it kept me focused on the fact that the provider is better than the provision.
mm,
Everything I have is temporary. I don't own anything. I'm a steward. And that if God is allowing me to be in this moment, how do I use it for other people?
mm,
And that's always been the genesis, I mean, the catalyst of my career. So in my Jordan years, I didn't feel that I finally was understood. I felt that I was finally in a position to be a representative of other people who were misunderstood. So at least
mm.
they can look at me and say, this guy exists. I feel what he's trying to do. He exists. And so I always made sure that in articles that they wrote my name, Jason Mayden of Nike, not Nike's Jason Mayden. Nike didn't own me. It was
Mm.
God's property.
You gotta talk to the music business off that, but continue.
Bro, no, my name first. I was born with my name. I'm gonna leave with my name.
Mhm.
I always wore, I tried to wear my hat backwards or an earring or a necklace just to signal to people who look like us that you can be yourself unapologetically. It's a slower path, but it's the necessary path in order to have integrity and not compromise my soul for a paycheck.
Mm,
And so that was really the thing I told myself. You grow up, you watch people and they're your heroes, and then the next thing you know, you go from high school to being on a private plane with a guy you've admired your entire life. And there's a great amount of discipline that has to come with that because you can indulge in a lifestyle that's not your own.
mm,
So I would tell myself they don't need more friends, they got them. And I'm not here to hang out. I'm the secret gadget guy. I'm Lucius Fox because that's one of my
mm,
heroes. Like I want to make gadgets for these people so they can perform and be better. That's my role within this clique.
mm,
And so the humility in knowing that my gifts and talents were there to serve others, and then the humility in knowing that my role represented something bigger than my own success, but a possible self, a possible outcome that was not available to young Black people at that time. I
mm,
was the only one that was like me at that level. And I still take that very seriously today. I think about every person, not just men, but because I know as a man over 6 foot, speak English as a first language, born in the US, highly educated, I'm privileged. Heterosexual male, I'm exceptionally privileged.
mm,
So I use my Black privilege to make space for our sisters and for everyone else. And I've consistently done that in my career. Because my goal is to be the person that people don't say exists. Like highly successful, but highly humble and open to serving. Like those two things can exist at the same time. It just takes a little bit more time to get there and you expose yourself to a little bit more hurt, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
mm. Brother, man, I'm faithful is the word that comes up, man, because I'm just even thinking about before there the 10 years, nearly a decade of letters. We talking about Pigeon Express, you know what I'm saying? There and then being there, but then ultimately you kind of talking about how you were kind of in the long game around this, that it takes some time, and you were clear about that. I even fast forward because we met in the valley, right? We met in the valley, in a stage of our lives where we're trying to kind of add a bit more tools, build a number of relationships, at a place where Cardinals play, right? And so what I'm curious about is then, kind of taking the context of serving. Now you're kind of in D school, you B school, you're doing everything. And then ultimately, you kind of continue this heart of service and this understanding of children and the importance of play into some great work. But one thing I do want to talk to you about is because I think you and I have known so many people who really, I think, let's just say, been enriched by the valley, and then many people have been burned by the valley.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, it could be a dark valley. And I think a lot of the conception of Silicon Valley is this quote unquote, I will never say there's ever a place that's godless. I don't believe in that at all, right? God is
Yeah.
everywhere. But
Yeah.
let's say there's maybe, to some degree, there's maybe an antagonistic view towards faith. So one, I want to talk about just kind of like, how did maybe your dynamic with God, or, how do you lean on him differently in the valley? Two, the dark, challenging side of the valley, even as one who's looking to serve in a great place of opportunity, right? How did you navigate just how God has seen the vision you have and just the realities of dealing in a space where money, riches, and so many things, I think, kind of line. And obviously, that's not the only thing about the valley, but, I just want to start with that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. No, that's a great question. And I think it was early exposure to affluence and wealth.
Mm.
When you hang out with Michael Jordan and Derek Jeter, I mean, I'm not impressed by a dude that sold an app. That's good for you. Congratulations, brother. Like I've seen enough, that what the access that this place offers me, I got at 19, 20 years old from people who look like me.
Mm.
So I have a very different perspective on success. I have a very different perspective on networking, very different perspective, access, and and I would say excellence, because I've seen men who, as the word of God says, beat their body and mastered their minds and conquered their flesh and did things that people thought were humanly impossible. Like I watched that daily, with these exceptional athletes. And so I'm not impressed by intelligence. I'm not impressed by wealth. I'm impressed by character. And so I always ask God, in the Silicon Valley, I'm not going to be the person at the event who's running around introducing myself. I'm the dude with a camouflage jacket, chilling, sipping on green tea. And I figure God is going to allow me to meet the person I'm supposed to meet, even if it's the person serving me this drink, even if it's the valet parker. I don't care who you are, because God can use anyone. And I've had some of the best conversations with janitors and security guards. And the wild part about that is I do believe that each of those moments, that may be God showing up to test me, to say, like, do you still love me enough to acknowledge the least of us? In this moment, are you paying attention to the least of us? And I think about that. We often see, especially in San Francisco, homeless people, when we talk about homelessness as a problem. And we talk about these people as if they're the problem. I think these people are God's beloved. And if we're ignoring them, we're ignoring God. Like, there's no way I could be here and working on something that the world don't need. Like, don't nobody need another photo app or another, food delivery service. They don't need that. So just understanding that I'm in a blessed and privileged position and that I must acknowledge the least of these, as the word of God says, children and marginalized people, then I'll be blessed. And so I haven't tried to fit in here. I actually don't want to fit into the valley, because it is a valley, and it's a valley that's not organic. It's silicon. So it tells you it's not real, and it's a deep crevice where people can go into themselves and worship themselves because of our intelligence. But the act of creation from nothing, and the act of innovation, is born out of creatio ex nihilo, which means create from nothing. That's the principle of God. He created from nothing. So when we talk about a startup, okay, then that's the book of Genesis. That's God's business pitch. If that was Y Combinator, that's God's business pitch, was the book of Genesis. This is why. This is my audience. This is who I'm serving. This is what I created. Here's my product market fit. So you can't look at innovation and creativity and bifurcate it from God. They're one and the same. So to your point, when people say this is God-less, no, I think it's God light. I think people are just light on God here because they see themselves as gods with lowercase g. So they understand the concept of a higher power. Unfortunately, because of hubris and wealth and pop culture, that higher power is often regarded as ourselves. And so I think in Silicon Valley, what has allowed me to maintain my peace is I make decisions with my ethics, not my paycheck. I do the thing that's uncommon because I don't want to be a common man. It's easy to be common and do what everybody else does. I follow what God tells me to do unapologetically. And, it works out because I feel like if I could be an example of faith, even in the midst of my own, sins and, I'm far from perfect, then that's all people want to see is consistency. And I tell my kids and I tell a lot of people I mentor, greatness isn't doing one thing well once. It's doing the small things well consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do the small thing well, I tell everybody, man, put the shopping cart back. My kids used to ask me why. I'm like, because a common person wouldn't do that. Uncommon people follow through and finish. So that's kind of been my approach. Those small little tasks, and is finishing those tasks well, because that's honoring God in all the things you do, not just the big things where you get attention, but in those small things when no one is looking. So that's how I've been able to survive and thrive here.
Brother, man, this is powerful. Really, 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 really powerful, man. And I want to honor this time because I'm fortunate to have your time and connect offline. But I want to say a couple things, brother. Number one,
Yeah.
I do think this is going to put some fire into some behinds, particularly when it comes to the valley, because I think, like I said, that's not all the valley. Given the picture, it is creation. It's kind of like, just because you don't acknowledge God doesn't mean that God is not at work in here. The power is just like that juxtaposition, right? I was just in SF, and it's like DC, right? It's just like, this is the nation's capital of all places. People, like, things should be, this should be the greatest picture of what this country can be, versus in a place of such creation. When you're thinking about, okay, I can create anything, like Solomon said, of all the things he could have asked for, he asked for wisdom, right? There's a beauty of, like, of all the things that create, what are the things that are really going to move the world forward? And you have consistently and are consistently one who takes the power. Power is not inherently a bad thing. It's what you do with it. Takes the power and influence you have and uses it to serve people. And so I do want to kind of get to this chapter, man, because I call Team Polemith, is I want to give, I would love, I think, if you give people a picture of what your rhythm with God looks like on a day-to-day basis. I know every day is different, but because you currently, you have just taken on a role, president of a amazing brand. Shout out to Jerry Lorenzo. That's not my people, it's your people, but he's our people because he's a brother in the faith, right? But with fear of God and this beautiful work that you're doing, sometimes I just think about, like, I know there are people who be inspired by just what rhythm looks like with a life like yours of service. How do you do it and don't burn out? How do you find space to do all these things? Where does God play into your rhythm?
Man, that's a great question. I listen to that gentle whisper, man, the Holy Spirit. I think people assume God is going to be a thunderous roar, and it's the gentle whisper, man. It's the intuition. It's the metuneta, that inner thing you feel that says, maybe I should respond back to that. Maybe I shouldn't respond. Maybe I should help. Maybe this person needs a word of encouragement. I think the only way that you can get into that flow and that rhythm of knowing when the Holy Spirit is speaking to you is through, stillness, and not physically still, but spiritually still. Because the thing about living in this life, in this physical body, is we're both eternal and temporal at the same time. Our spirit is constantly with the Lord. Our body is here. And so when you understand the nuances of being both eternal and temporal, you can tap into the energy to ask God for your instructions. If you think about life as a video game, I always use it, metaphors and analogies. It's beautiful because you always can go back and look at the map. You always have a way to navigate through a video game. We have that, but we've forgotten that we actually do have a helper that he left behind in the Holy Spirit to help us navigate. I just lean on that daily. I lean on that, and I trust that when God says do something, even if I don't understand it, and if I have peace about it, then I know it's for me. And so, my rhythm is honestly choosing the things where I feel at peace, even if I don't have understanding, speaking to God every single second, asking him to help me with the simplest things, down to where should I park? Which street should I turn down? I'm in constant communication with him in my mind and in my heart. I started to get into journaling a lot. I've gotten into therapy. I think every Black person deserves a therapist, and I think it should be government subsidized. Because you can't expect a population of people who've been under systematic oppression and trauma to automatically heal ourselves. What we have accomplished is nothing short of a miracle. The fact that we're functioning and we're creative and we lead culture with so much joy and passion and compassion is a miracle because a lesser, you know, collection of people would have broken under the weight of all the things that have been, you know, placed upon us. But somehow we just rise, and we rise beautifully and collectively, and we still forgive.
Mm.
And so that's the best way that I say I get into a rhythm with God, is understanding and appreciating myself, because having a great relationship with yourself is having a great relationship with your creator and your father, because he loved you enough to bring you here. And you just have to understand that you may not know what the path is, but there is a path and a plan for you. You may think you need this big grand outcome with a publicly facing job. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life didn't have jobs that were sexy. They didn't have a lot of followers on social media. They were just people who used whatever platform they had to show, you know, compassion. But that's my rhythm. You know, it's like, God, like, you know, use me. You know, I do have filters in place to protect myself, because there are some people who are opportunists. But I do make sure that I try to acknowledge everyone that reaches out, at least even if it's, you know, a fist bump or an emoji or something, because I know what it's like to not have anybody reach back and feel like, dang, man, nobody sees me. I feel invisible. Because I don't ever want anyone to assume because I don't respond that they don't matter. I may just be overwhelmed and have a lot going on. But there are a lot of people that are hurting right now. And so for me, I don't think about just the moment we're in. I think because you know, being trained as a futurist, I have to think about 10 years out. And so when I understand that for the first time in the history of our life, we've had a collective trauma globally, that also means that we need to have collective healing globally. So I'm already down the road thinking, how do I build something and be parts of things that give people a place of rest and enjoyment and beauty? And that's a lot of what, you know, the discussion was and continues to be with my brother Jerry, and, you know, and us, and why we came together at this moment in our lives. It happened all organically. I've known that man for almost a decade. He's been nothing but a brother and a friend, someone I love, respect, and admire. You know, and he genuinely is a man of faith. People may think that it's part of the brand, but it's not. It's genuinely who he is. And so none of this was planned. None of this was strategized. It was just, you know, trust in the Lord, you know, because in my lowest moment, which was early 2020, no one knew, because I showed up and served so much. People thought everything was popping. It wasn't. I'm just not a person that's going to give the devil any joy in seeing me struggle. He's going to be confused. The devil going to be like, why is he still praising? I'm taking things from him. I'm like, because you lightening my load. That's all it is, brother.
Already, man. This the Job standoff, man. You know what I'm saying?
What can I do? You know what I'm saying? Am I going to let the enemy rejoice and me forfeit my blessings? Or am I going to trust God, you know, and say, look, you kept me this far. You know, you haven't failed. I've made it through 100% of my bad days, and God never misses. God is the Steph Curry of in the blessing business. You know,
Hey. Hey. Hey.
So, you know, why do I have to worry? You know,
Those long shots of our life, man. God always makes it. He makes it. He makes it. Brother, man, I think what people will hear beyond what I could put to words, but I think in particular the praying without ceasing in action, of that being a consistent conversation throughout the day, and that sustaining you alongside of having proper divinely informed boundaries. Number two, I think there's also a picture. Shout out to my sister Nona Jones, amazing sister. She's head of faith-based partnerships at Facebook. Amazing. She the people, but she talks also about how important it is for her even to respond to everybody that she can, around that view of being seen, and how important that view of worth, that you're matter. I see you, and so I see that. But ultimately, man, I think what people will also take at least is, I love this macro view of service. I think I don't want people to miss that, right? There's people do their 2021 goals and write it down, but you kind of was just like, you know, I can't help it. I'm trained as a futurist. And so understanding where we're in a space of collective lament, then there needs to be healing because of your recognition of what the world needs. It informed how you've allowed yourself and what you said yes to serve. My brother, that is something that I think I tip my hat to. Is one of the infinite reasons why I respect you and trust you as a brother, as a confidant. But brother, I pray that people also see that as instructive. That yes, we were all here for such a time, But if we all think about what the greatest needs are, I think the greatest impact our lives will have. And so, brother, man, I think you gave us a great last word. But if anything else, I want to give you the floor to say, is there anything coming up front? Clearly, we got this fear God thing rolling, but want to give you the floor. How can we support you? How can we be praying for you? What's going on in the world of J May?
Ah, man, that's a great question. I would say first, you know, man, if you could support me, I would say do it through the children. Check on the babies in your life. Check on them, you know, and not just check in with them, but check on them. Really sit down and understand how they're feeling, because they're dealing with some complex adult emotions, and we need to make sure that we're not just so busy and caught up in our own problems that we don't realize and recognize that we can transmute over unnecessary fear and psychosis to our kids. So I would say check on the babies if you want to help me, because we need them to be stable, way more stable than we are. Prayers for me, you know, continued discernment, you know, continued commitment to all my restorative goals, physically, mentally, all that good stuff. Because if I'm at my best, then that means I can do my best work for God. So that's all I'm asking is I'm not on a vanity play where I'm trying to be in somebody's calendar and no crap like that. I just want to be my best so I can do my best for God, because all of us are running our race. You know, no matter if you're on a bike or if you're in a sports car, you're still on your race. You're still on your path. So it's important for you to appreciate what you have and love your life and not covet anyone else's, because a person in a sports car may go fast, but they may not go far. And so I think you need to really appreciate what God has given you, because it's enough. It's never not enough. It's always enough for you to use it. You just have to see it as such. The glass is never half full or half empty. It's refillable. It's a glass. You know, it's not. That's the whole point. You can fill it back up. So fill your day up with joyfulness. You know, don't get stuck at looking at negativity. Don't have senseless arguments. Learn to forgive and learn to accept goodbye, but also anticipate hello. And that's the best thing I can share with people.
My brother, man, and the best thing is a great thing, man. That Jesus is called Logos in John 1. It was the best way that God could put to word and dictate the best communication of himself to human beings. And you know that you from Chi-Town, you got flavor because you're a wordsmith. And I pray that that word sits and resonates and carries people forward in the way that his word has and will always. My brother, I love you. You are loved. Thank you for loving us in the world, good brother. Holla at you soon, girl.
Yes, sir.
Peace
Love,
out.
bro.